the word metaphor all the time. Meta means above. I'm trying to think of other words that use meta. No, I can't think of anything. Meta. Metamorph is a really good song by the band Uzen, but it also means to change in a way that puts you above the thing that you were. Metamorphosis. Metamorphosis. The thing where metamorph is happening. Like a caterpillar into a butterfly. Metamorphosis. Change. Big change. Change that's above change as we think about it. Metamorph. Anyway. Meta. I don't know what for means. P-H-O-R. Hey, let's spell the word. Let's just do the thing. We're getting a little tired, but we're still tough. Metaphor. M-E-T-A-P-H-O-R. Metaphor. A metaphor is when you say that something is like something else. If you use the word like, you call it a simile. Oh, this is simile. Rain is like, I don't know, falling water, which it is. If you don't use like, this is like this. This behaves as this other thing does. If you don't use those words, like or as, metaphor is a better word than simile for what you're talking about. The rain was a ghostly whisper on the window panes of Samantha's room. That draws you a picture, doesn't it? Metaphor is a way of drawing a picture. Because clearly the rain is not what I just said that it was, but it might be like it a little bit here and there. So you can point to things, you can point at things, and bring people somewhere without actually telling them where you're going, which is useful. Metaphor. You'll notice that I'm always using metaphors. My language use is heavily metaphoric, you could say. This whole conversation has been me treating one emotion that I feel as if it were a person inside of me, talking with all these other people. I do that because there's a lot of good that you can get if you treat an emotion that way. Because emotions are such rich things with so much stuff going on inside of them. And since they happen inside of people, that's a whole other level of stuff going on. So you're talking about stuff that's so hard to talk about because there's so much there. One tool that you can use when things get tough like that, if you don't want to just go, or you don't want to go, is you can try to think 3 turns around it. Oh, this thing is kind of like that. This thing is, if you said that this was that, somebody would know what you were talking about who's been there and seen that kind of thing. Yeah. Metaphor. That's what we've been doing. The reason why I've been drawing all these metaphors is because I recognize, as an adult, that I have been overly practicing some parts of myself without even knowing it for a long time. Now that I do know, I have the chance to change it if I don't like it. Also, I have the chance to not. The not changing can be very comfortable because we've talked a lot about bandwidth, which is a metaphor for a very difficult thing to describe. Which is, God, I can only use other strange words for it, like energy level. Remember how we talked about how to grow your bandwidth, you have to really use it. You have to stretch it. And that takes a lot out of you, you know? We also talked about how hard it is to talk about it. Anyway. So in the not changing, that gives you the option to look at something else and change it. Because you can't change everything all at once just so easily. At least that's how I see things right now. Of course, sometimes it is so easy to do things. That happens to people sometimes, where they have these big changes of mind that seem to come out of nowhere. Some people will tell you, oh, that person was changing this whole time, you just didn't see it. Maybe. But also things spontaneously do happen also. So I don't want to discredit that. That's important. However, However, sometimes you gotta stick with something. Hang in there with it. Let it talk. Give it some air. Let other folks talk too. But don't let them completely shout down what one part's saying. Especially if that part is used to being squashed. Frustration is used to being run away from. Again, if this were a person, I would say that that person is used to people running away from them, or shouting at them to keep them quiet, or telling them they're wrong without really listening. I think that a lot of people were told they were wrong, got run away from, and got shouted at a lot. And I think that if you do that to a real person, then those parts of them might grow. Because now they're forced to deal with that part more. What happens when you deal with something? Well, like it or not, if you do it a bunch of times, even if it's just because you were made to, well, that's a practice. Even if it's one that you never thought that you were doing. Again, I don't like the word practice, but I can't think of a better word. Rehearse is pretty good. There's no way we're getting out of this thing looking like good people, huh? There's no way that we're going to pull out of this podcast episode and be like, yeah, Justin, you're a hero. That's okay. I'm Run Man. So either heroes are a little different than you might think of them, or there's no such thing. I prefer to think that they're just different and tough to describe, kind of like everything that we were just talking about. I wonder if this was a book and not a podcast. I wonder if a council setup would rate this book as elementary school grade, high school grade, college level. I don't know. I know that we talked about some things in elementary terms. We even spelled words that weren't too hard to spell. Metaphor's kind of hard to spell. Somebody might use an F, but we use PH out here. Some parts feel elementary, other parts feel high schooly, especially the really strongly emotional parts. And then some of it feels really college-y, especially me recognizing how hard it is to talk about all this. That requires something that's called introspection. INTROSPECTION. I believe that is how you spell introspection. Introspection means looking within. Like spectate, like spectate. To look around. Intro, kind of like introvert. Looking within. There's a lot of that on this podcast. A lot of metaphors, a lot of introspection. Sometimes a lot of frustration. Again, you gotta let that guy talk sometimes, because he needs to understand that he's a part of a team and he's got responsibilities like the rest of us do. We got places to go, things to do, doors to fix, and good days to have, even if we can't fix those doors. That's really important. So what do? Well, if you're me, you start running and you start talking, and then you find some cool little tidbits on the way. Maybe we've shared some in a way that's appropriate and helpful. I can't believe that I cursed that one time. I got a lot of practicing left in me. But thanks for listening, y'all. Boy, it sure was important to me to get that out of the thing. Because here's the thing. If I stop doing things with frustration, if I stop practicing it and talking to it and letting the whole team in on the whole thing, bringing everybody in and holding counsel, which is hard and takes bandwidth, but also grows me. If I don't do any of that stuff, by default, we'll get into default another time. That's a great word to spell, but we don't have time. We're almost home. If I weren't to practice it consciously, like right now when we're trying to talk our way through it and introspect about it, if I didn't do that so much, and I do a lot, then it would just keep doing itself without my attention. And the echoes would just keep getting longer. These little 90 seconds of I feel a thing, they would just keep growing without my attention and without my help, without bringing them into the forefront. Talk like, do we really need that much? We got to have these conversations. We've got to have these conversations because frustration is good, like everything else is good, sometimes for some things. But it's very often not best if it's the loudest voice. But if you've taught it to be the loudest voice, or if you've found that it grew that big while you weren't looking, when you were growing up or whatever, it just depends on what you want. What's it worth? And then that's the bigger thing. Not only what's it worth, because in order to imagine that, you have to let the other voices talk. You have to let happy talk, and you have to let satisfied talk. You have to let triumph talk. You have to let conceit and pride talk. You gotta let everybody talk. If you want a life where all these parts are more or less in line with each other, talking at reasonable volumes, at reasonable times, each one with their expertise, each one knows how to help the whole move forward. Well, doggone, I just lost my thread. Lost the thread is an expression. It is an idiomatic expression. We will talk about what idioms are another time. But it's kind of like a metaphor. I lost the thread. As if this whole idea, as if this whole podcast were me sewing something, and now I can't find out where the thing is that I was sewing. That I was sewing with. Anyway. Oh, that's what it was. That's what it was. It is important to know where that path leads. And to think, what would my life be like? What places, what images come to my mind when I practice the idea of all of these parts of me talking nicely to each other, or at least nicely enough where we can all get stuff done with all of us pulling for the greater good. And I mean all of us, as in all of the parts of me. Internal community. See, there's external communities and internal. We're trying to integrate parts of ourselves by learning that there's a whole thing, and there's little parts of that thing that each have their own little role to play. Just like each finger in your hand has a role to play, but the finger is not the hand. Anyway, the other part of that was, now hold on a second. That's all nice imagery. All these parts of myself talking to each other very nicely. They all know they're all a part of a thing. And they all know they have their own role to play. Sometimes somebody needs to shine, and everyone's got to back them up and get on board. Other times, it's less clear what parts are needed for what task, or what kind of a day, or what kind of a thought. But when I think about what it might be like not to do those things, I think, well, that frees up space for other things, good, bad, and ugly. If I don't use all this energy to try to build energy to make this practice happen, but I'm going to say something pretty tough. I don't know if it's 100% true. People live what they believe. I don't know if that's true. I think it's true. I don't know if it's absolutely true, though. I think there's other stuff going on. But the only reason why I wouldn't do it, since just the natural place my mind goes when I see these when I see these voices all talking right to each other inside of me, because I practiced it for however many years until I've really got a good sharp crew in my brain just really going for it and doing all these great things. All those images are so great. The only reason why I wouldn't do them and focus on doing nothing or focus on doing something else while these parts grow out of balance would be because I didn't think that it was possible. Can you imagine? That is actually the big thing, because I'm currently locked in a struggle with myself. I find myself listening to frustration one time too many, when frustration, as big and engorged as it is, taking over the conversation a few times too many, it'll say things like, there's no point to these other voices. There's no point to the integrated whole. I'll make myself into the integrated whole. And then Justin in frustration will be just the same thing. And isn't that good for me? The main reason why I don't have conversations like this all the time, the main reason why I don't practice frustration consciously, and all these other parts of me, to bring them in, harmony. The biggest thing that keeps me from doing that is that I don't think it's possible. I see people who seem like they've got really good crews in their brains walking around all the time. I see it all the time. Or I think I see it. Because again, this is tough. Mind's eyes are not eyeballs. You can't just look at one. You've got to look with all of your eyeballs to even get the barest idea what somebody else's mind's eye or what their internal crew, their council, might look like. What voices seem very strong, what voices don't seem like they ever talk, what voices talk really closely with other voices and they don't leave others, they don't let others into the conversation. Boy, does that happen all the time with all sorts of stuff. And you start thinking like, man, especially if you're my age and you start getting older and you've been at this a while and you've noticed just how big some of these differentials are, you start thinking to yourself, oh man, is it even possible? Am I too set in my ways? And what would it cost? What would it cost? Would it cost me using 99% of my bandwidth every day of my life for some period of time until the crew gets proportional to each other enough where people can start shaking hands again inside my head and making up with each other and then getting on the same page and doing things like make a podcast or anything else that's important? Man, when I'm having a tough time, I start thinking things like that's not even possible. There's no reason why it is possible, because there's no reason why it's not possible. That's a part of being an adult, is you get to kind of decide on strangely deep levels what you think could be done if you worked hard enough at it and what can't be done. Now that is a tough spot to put somebody in. But that's where we are. Us and our crews. We get to decide. When I practice consciously these relationships between all these parts of myself, that's me saying, yes, I believe in it. Or if I don't believe in it, I'm going to act like I do, because on the off chance that it exists, this possibility that I can actually get somewhere, move the needle, have some harmony, if that is possible, that's worth giving 99% of what's within me 99% of the time to grow the extra few percent of me that will eventually be necessary for the next level of challenge when it comes to making this harmony happen. I mean, we're still mixing metaphors. We're still not being totally clear in the language. And I'm trying to just recognize that every few sentences, just because it's so tough to get through this conversation. Within myself, it's tough, but then talking through it using words that other people can hear, holy moly. That's not easy. It's so hard that I'm doing sitcast again. So let's stop doing sitcast, because I think we did it. 126, we've done it. Okay. Yeah, we've done okay. We have actually we've done phenomenally well. We've had a tough conversation. Really made something out of it. Now I'm going to go back and decide. I'm going to go back inside and decide with the rest of my day, every time I make a choice, how adult I want to be about that choice, and how that thing that I'm doing is a part of the greater conversation of what's possible and what's not possible. Because there's no reason outside to say it's not possible to get there and have some serious harmony. But there's also no reason why there should be that much harmony or could be that much harmony. And all those stories are trying to happen. They're trying to show me what happens when that life gets lived. And I'm a third of the way through mine, or a quarter of the way through mine already. So here we are. Kind of important, right? 99% of what's in me important? I don't know. I'll let you know the next time that I decide to do a podcast. Or do anything. Whew. Heavy. Pretty heavy. Let's breathe. Oh, and close this out. Okay, I want to mention something really quick. It's important because a lot of the time I'll talk to myself for long periods of time on tough subjects, and I'll walk away from that conversation, especially if it's late at night. And I'll think to myself, boy, I really have it, don't I? I figured it out. But it's important to notice, I have not figured it out. This is not a complete conversation. Best not to treat it that way and be all smug and satisfied. Also better not to not congratulate myself for having had this conversation, which, by the way, is always happening all the time. I might have alluded to that earlier. And I think everybody can identify with that process. I think we're all doing something like it all the time. I'm just saying that, yeah, this is ongoing. This is ongoing. And, yeah. As tempting as it is to say, I figured it out, we got it licked, let's just keep doing this, and it's going to be okay. No. Let's be vigilant, but also caring. Gentle but firm. This has been Household Friendly Cast, more or less, number 3. This has been right along with Runman, with your host Runman, episode number 45. And who knows, we might even do a breathcast or something later. I don't know, why not? Who knows? Anywho, there's a bird right there. Let me try to zoom in. Yeah. Look at him. Why is it all blurry? Hey. Aw, it's all blurry. He's looking at me. Okay, alright, that's enough. Bye, guys.